Hi, Dave here. In today's archaeonomy video, I'll be discussing obsidian, an important material to cultures around the globe before the development of metallurgy. I'll look at obsidian in New Zealand first, then we can take a look at how it's been used by people all around the world. So what is obsidian? Put simply, it's glass created by a volcano. It's normally formed by rhyolitic lava, which is particularly high in silica. This kind of lava is thick and viscous, and if rapidly cooled, say by hitting a body of water, crystalline mineral formation is prevented, and a non-crystalline amorphous structural material, glass, is created. Volcanoes are not the only way for glass to form in nature. For example, lightning strikes can turn silica in the ground into glass, strange coral-like structures called fulgurites. The heat from meteor impacts can create chunks of glass called tektites, though they tend to have specific names relating to the location. Moldavite, for example, comes from the Czech Republic. Obsidian, as a glass, has an extremely fine-grained structure, meaning that it fractures conchoidally, making it very useful for tool making. It's extremely hard, but also extremely brittle, so it can be used to make devilishly sharp blades, the sharpest of any stone, and most, if not all, metal tools, but they'll also be incredibly fragile. All obsidians are not created equal. The perfect obsidian for tool making is homogeneous, free of impurities and flaws. But many obsidians contain fractures, crystals, or air bubbles that create weak points in the material. Some inclusions may make the obsidian more useful for decorative purposes. For example, snowflake obsidian contains cristobalite crystals within it, while microscopic particles of magnetite in the structure creates rainbow obsidian. When black and brown obsidians are mottled together, it's called mahogany obsidian. An unusual feature of obsidian is the way that the surface absorbs water. A freshly flaked piece of obsidian will absorb moisture from the soil or air at a discernible rate, governed by temperature and the particular chemistry of the obsidian involved. In parts of the world, these rates of hydration have been determined, and it's been used as a dating method, called obsidian hydration dating. The big advantage of it is it's a lot cheaper than C14 dating. It's been experimented with in New Zealand, but never really took off here as it just wasn't reliable enough. The most common colour for obsidian is black, though a range of colours are available, determined by the other elements trapped in the silica. Even amongst black obsidians with a thin enough piece backlit, a colour can be seen, and these colours can be used to help identify the source where the obsidian was quarried from. Hopefully you can see here, where the flake is thin, it's olive green in colour. While in this example, it's more of a banded grey. And this arrowhead is almost transparent, with a faint olive green. Now, if holding a piece of obsidian up to the light and squinting isn't scientific enough for you, a technique called X-ray fluorescence, or XRF for short, will probably satisfy your desire for scientific rigour. XRF works by exposing the sample to X-rays, which results in the ionization of the surface. The ionized surface releases photons with wavelengths characteristic to whatever elements are present in the material. By measuring these, the component elements and the proportions thereof can be recorded. By taking samples from each of the obsidian sources in New Zealand and testing them, any flake can be compared to the sources to identify which one it came from, as the exact composition of minerals in each lava flow will be slightly different. So what are the sources of obsidian in New Zealand? In the past I've mentioned Mare Island in the Bay of Plenty, which is the source of the highest quality obsidian in the country. There are 10 varieties of obsidian found there, including a light tan, almost honey-coloured one. There are 13 obsidian sources in Northland, varying in colour from black to red with white inclusions. There are 2 sources on Great Barrier Island, 1 on Fennel Island, 6 sources in Coromandel, and 2 in Waihi. There are 4 more sources around Rotorua, 3 around Maraetai, and 5 sources at Taupo. And that's it. You can see from this there's no obsidian sources on the east and west coast of the North Island, and none in the South Island at all. This limited distribution is likely the reason that when so many other trade routes collapsed in Maori history, the trade of obsidian continued. It was too important not to. Important for what? Game of Thrones would teach us that it's brilliant for killing White Walkers, but I honestly doubt that was a factor in the real world. Minecraft would teach us that obsidian can be used to create a portal to a hell dimension. Luckily for us, that isn't real. Prehistoric Maori used obsidian the same way we'd use a box cutter or scalpel. When flaked into a rough blade, it provided an extremely sharp cutting edge that, when blunt, would either be broken off to create a new sharp edge or simply discarded. Obsidian flakes could also be used in woodwork to scrape an adze or chiseled surface to make it smooth. In fact, some woodworkers still use glass for this purpose. We find numerous flakes and cores of obsidian, but almost never find non-disposable tools made from it. In contact period sites in New Zealand, worked bottle glass, particularly the thick glass from the base of black beer bottles, has been found, used the same way as one would use obsidian. Maori did not use obsidian for weapons that I know of, which is very different to how it was used elsewhere in the world. Having said that, let's take a look at obsidian artifacts from around the world and see how different cultures made use of the material. The first known use of obsidian by hominids comes from Melka Kuncha, a Paleolithic site in Ethiopia. Obsidian was available there in large quantities. Since it's so easy to create a cutting edge from it should be no surprise that hominids 1.7 million years ago would take advantage of it, and obsidian tools would continue to get more sophisticated from the Acheulean period on. Obsidian is the first trade good in human history that's left us with material evidence. It's been found at nearly every Neolithic settlement in the Near East, despite them being many kilometres from the nearest source in Anatolia and Armenia. These trade routes, in existence as early as the 8th millennia BC, showed the exchange of objects, and thus presumably of ideas, at the very dawn of civilization, extending south into Egypt and as far east as Iran. Obsidian really lends itself to the manufacture of projectile points, as it's able to take an extremely fine sharp edge. It's perfect for the broadhead tip of an arrow designed to cut flesh, whether it be for hunting or war. So unsurprisingly, whenever a culture used bows and had access to obsidian, they made arrowheads out of it. And of course larger examples could be attached to javelins or spears. This is a Clovis point from the Fen cache. I mentioned Clovis points in my flint video. They were made by some of the first settlers in North America and used to hunt the megafauna there. For a long time, the Clovis culture was believed to be the first humans to colonize the Americas. It's certainly what I was taught at university. But now archaeologists believe that the Western-stemmed culture is contemporary with Clovis, or even predates it. Western-stemmed spear and arrow points have a distinctive tang on them, while Clovis heads have a notch in the base. Obsidian serves well as a disposable blade or scraper, and some cultures went to the trouble of shaping it into proper knives and daggers. Sadly for fantasy fans, the brittleness of obsidian makes it completely useless for the manufacture of proper swords. Although the Mesoamericans found a clever workaround for that problem that we'll look into soon. The crafting of obsidian in parts of the world went far beyond just making projectile points and blades. Amazing objects were made by master artisans that are simply stunning. More so when one remembers that obsidian is harder than steel, and being glass, incredibly brittle. One thing that I hope you have noticed is that obsidian is quite beautiful, and for that reason it's been worn in jewellery for millennia. Beads, amulets, all manner of personal decoration. This spouted bowl, roughly 5 inches in diameter, was found in Tepe Gawra in Iraq. It dates from the Ubaid period, around 4000 BC. This beautiful little bowl was masterfully ground from a single chunk of obsidian, sourced from 400 miles away in Turkey. Here's an example from the other side of the world. The Mesoamerican civilizations made heavy use of obsidian, and used it in interesting and unorthodox ways. Obsidian blades provided a handy alternative to stingray spines for ritual bloodletting. This is an obsidian mirror. Mirrors played an important ritual role in Mesoamerican society, far more than just a tool to provide a reflective surface. Here's another example of staggering craftsmanship from Mesoamerica. This cylinder, probably an Aztec artifact, was made as an ear spool to be worn in the earlobe. The fine work required to craft this out of a single chunk of obsidian without breaking it is incredible. You could understand it if it was blown into a mould and cut, but no, this was made by reducing down a solid piece of volcanic glass. As I mentioned before, the Mesoamericans developed a weapon that made the best use of obsidian's peerless cutting ability and minimized its weaknesses as a brittle glass, the makua wheat. These obsidian swords had hardwood bodies and grips, with obsidian blades set along the edges and sometimes the tip. The Spanish conquistadors had a healthy respect for these fearsome cutting weapons. This is a drawing of an original that was held in the royal armories of Madrid. Obsidian is still valued today for its aesthetic value, made into jewellery and other decorative objects. It's still napped into tools by those interested in the craft, and there's some people who still highly value obsidian as a material for practical tools. Surgeons. Hashtag not all. Obsidian blades are staggeringly sharp, more so than surgical steel scalpels. This allows finer cuts and less damage to surrounding tissue. This being said, the surgeon has to be very careful not to apply any lateral pressure, because obsidian, being glass, and an obsidian scalpel blades are very thin glass at that, can snap very easily. I hope this video has provided a good overview of obsidian, and how this material has been used by different cultures throughout history. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment and subscribe. Cheers!